What if I told you that one of gospel's most fearless voices just unleashed a revelation that could send shockwaves through the entire church world? Dr. Juanita Bynum, the powerhouse preacher known for her fire, her bold truth, and her refusal to bow to anyone, has just publicly accused Bishop Paul Morton of trying to silence her. This isn't a rumor. This isn't whispers in the pews. This is a direct, unapologetic call-out that could ignite one of the biggest controversies gospel ministry has seen in years. Yes, you heard that right. A battle behind the pulpit. A war over truth and secrets they prayed would never see daylight are now bursting into the open. And trust me, this is just the beginning. Family, buckle up, because what we're about to dive into isn't your average church drama or some gospel industry gossip. This is a tangled, high-stakes clash of power, influence, and alleged silencing that could rattle the very foundation of the faith community. Juanita Bynum, a name that commands attention, synonymous with fiery preaching and unapologetic prophetic declarations, has just ripped the curtain back on a story no one saw coming. She claims that Bishop Paul Morton, the highly respected founder of the Full Gospel Baptist Church Fellowship, tried to shut her down. This isn't whispers. This isn't speculation. This is a public, pointed accusation that's already sending shockwaves through the pews. And make no mistake, this isn't just about two iconic figures in gospel ministry locking horns. Oh no, this is about what really happens when power, prestige, and the pulpit collide behind closed doors. In this video, we're breaking it all down. The hidden backstory, the key moments that led to this explosive turning point, and the exact statements that have the gospel world in uproar. We'll trace the real history between Juanita Bynum and Paul Morton, why their connection matters now more than ever, and the precise moment the dynamic shifted. Was it a matter of theology, ego, or something far deeper? Juanita's words are sharp, unfiltered, and impossible to ignore, and by the time you hear her side, you may never see either of them the same way again. The wider picture, how this could affect gospel ministry and the legitimacy of church leadership moving forward. Let me add that although Juanita has rattled the table before, this may be the first time the repercussions has been this severe. Let's go back in time and discover how Juanita Bynum and Paul Morton's paths even came to cross before we get into the receipts and jaw-dropping moments. Because if you don't, you won't understand the gravity of what's happening right now. The worst part is still to come. Their relationship may not be as coincidental as you may believe. We may be here today for precisely that purpose. We must look back far into the early years of both of their ministries to fully see why Juanita Bynum's recent allegations regarding Bishop Paul Morton have shocked the gospel community. In the early 1990s, Bishop Paul Morton gained notoriety as the founder of the Full Gospel Baptist Church Fellowship, an organization that aimed to reconcile the spirit-filled force of Pentecostal worship with traditional Baptist traditions. He wasn't just another large church pastor. He created movement. His leadership was indisputable, his voice was revered, and his impact extended well beyond the pulpit. In the meantime, Juanita Bynum was leaving her imprint through her unreserved, soul-piercing lectures and prophetic teachings rather than through denominational leadership. She had established herself as a formidable evangelist by the mid to late 1990s, and she was frequently asked to speak at some of the biggest church conferences in the country. She was renowned for speaking the truth fearlessly, frequently at the price of her personal connections with influential religious figures. Over time, these two were bound to come into contact. Both of their ministries functioned in circles that overlapped: prominent conferences, gospel events broadcast on television, and national church assemblies attended by the top ministers. Additionally, they respected one another when they did meet. Bynum was the up-and-coming speaker who could elicit a whole room to worship with a single sentence, whereas Morton was an established religious leader with the platform and contacts. At some ministry events over the years, they took the stage together. While Bynum valued how his ministry was linking the conventional and charismatic streams of the faith, Morton would invite her to speak, acknowledging her anointing. From the outside, their relationship appeared to be founded on a shared goal of reaching souls and admiration for one another. This is where things become fascinating, though. Those who closely observe both ministries observed that, although they were in the same social circles, there were also hints of friction. There were whispers in church halls, muttering among conference organizers, and the occasional omission of one name on the other stage, when it was nearly a given that they would appear together, not open public arguments. We may never fully understand whether such strain stemmed from doctrinal disagreements, interpersonal conflicts, or covert politics. However, we are aware of this. Juanita Bynum and Paul Morton never had a casual relationship. It was multi-layered, intricate, and full of the kind of hidden undercurrents that could only be revealed with time and possibly conflict. This background is important because Juanita wasn't referring to a complete stranger or a distant coworker when she recently claimed that Bishop Morton attempted to silence her. She was referring to a person she had known for many years, someone who stood near enough to her during her journey to have an impact on her voice in the church. Her comments have struck like a thunderclap because of this. We need to go back in time before we even discuss the blazing accusations and attempts at silence, since today's events weren't sudden. Bishop Paul Morton and Juanita Bynum have a long history of conflict, and you need the whole context to truly see why her current remarks were so hurtful. One of the most well-known and influential voices in gospel and Christian ministry for many years has been Juanita Bynum. She gained notoriety quite quickly. She was more than simply a preacher from the late 1990s to the early 2000s. She was a movement. Books, conferences, and sold-out church events were all inspired by her No More Sheets sermon, which became a cultural phenomenon. Her unvarnished honesty and refusal to sugarcoat the realities of faith, sin, and personal growth resonated with women all around the world. Bishop Paul S. Morton, a titan in his own right and the founder of Fellowship International and the Full Gospel Baptist Church, is on the opposing side. Morton has influenced many younger pastors and leaders through his mentoring, gospel music ministry, and decades of pastoral leadership. His network extends into some of the most influential religious circles in America, and his name is well known, particularly among Black churches. This is the point at which their worlds converge. Both Bynum and Morton worked in overlapping ministry settings, conferences, charity events, broadcast sermons, and gospel industry gatherings in the early 2000s. There was an unquestionable knowledge between the two factions at the time, notwithstanding the absence of any public conflict. Both were well known for voicing their opinions, aggressively defending their platforms, and having enormous influence. There was quiet tension as well as respect for one another, according to those close to both sides. According to others, Bynum's audacious, emotionally charged preaching style frequently defied conventional pulpit norms, and Morton, a seasoned leader in a highly male-dominated church setting, didn't always agree with it. According to others, Bynum believed that some male leaders, such as Morton, wanted her to soften her style so that it would be more appropriate in leadership roles within the mainstream church. After a few years, Juanita had to deal with a number of private and public issues, including her highly public divorce, accusations, financial difficulties, and a brief decline in her stature. Some insiders claim that this is when some well-known leaders started to distance themselves from her. Bishop Paul Morton was one name that subtly came up during the behind-the-scenes discussions. Was Morton, then, deliberately undermining her career? That is still up for discussion. However, it is crucial that Juanita remembers who supported her and who did not. Furthermore, when she claims today that Paul Morton attempted to silence her, she is referring to a pattern that she believes has been going on for years, rather than a single instance. This is where things become even more intriguing, though. Several reports claim that Bynum met behind closed doors with several of the leaders, including Morton, at a significant gospel conference years ago. It's unclear what was addressed at that discussion and whether it relates to her most recent disclosures. And believe me, you will see them both differently once we discuss what Juanita says transpired during that encounter. We must now examine the deeper, behind-the-scenes friction that has allegedly been building between the two figures for years in order to fully comprehend the seriousness of Juanita Bynum's allegation that Bishop Paul Morton attempted to silence her. Juanita Bynum has never shied away from taking a direct stance on religious matters, rather than merely addressing them in a generalized diplomatic manner. She has been a divisive voice when it comes to exposing deception and hypocrisy, addressing moral shortcomings among leaders, or denouncing the misuse of church funds. And conflict is practically a given when two highly esteemed figures in gospel music and ministry are in the same orbit, such as Bishop Paul Morton, the founder of the Full Gospel Baptist Church Fellowship. Throughout the years, according to insiders, Bishop Morton and Bynum have occasionally been friendly and even supportive of one another's ministries. However, the superficial civility masks deeper disagreements about the appropriate level of church transparency. According to reports, one of the first causes of friction was when Bynum started talking more candidly about her personal experiences, such as violence in previous relationships, and how certain church leaders disregarded her pleas for assistance. According to those familiar with the situation, Morton felt that such issues ought to be resolved within the church community rather than being discussed in public. But silence was not an option for Juanita. "If God delivered me from it, I'm going to testify about it," she frequently said to her followers. You never know who's listening. Bishop Morton seems to have pushed Mary to soften her commitment to speak freely, even if it caused discomfort to influential people. It is noteworthy that Morton's strategy has frequently focused on preserving the church brand's integrity in the eyes of the public. He has experienced controversy before. He is aware of how easily a public scandal may harm not only a leader's reputation, but also the organization they represent, as seen by previous conversations on church finances and arguments concerning his public positions on particular social problems. Morton allegedly intervened to persuade Bynum to use prudence as her statement began to cause controversy, particularly among prominent religious figures. According to reports, this is where things started to become personal. According to sources, Bishop Morton made it apparent in private talks that her candor regarding financial mismanagement, corruption, and unsuitable connections between church leaders was causing problems and harming the ministry. The seeds of this public backlash were planted here, though, and this is where it becomes even more strong. Those with knowledge of the situation say, Juanita believed Bishop Morton's appeals for caution went beyond merely defending the church. They were about safeguarding particular people whose acts would have been exposed if she continued speaking up. Now, here's when things start getting intense. According to individuals close to the matter, this friction between Juanita Bynum and Bishop Paul Morton didn't just come up overnight. Oh no. Beneath church smiles, courteous conference greets, and contrived public images, this has been simmering for years. Juanita is said to have begun it all by publicly preaching about problems in the gospel industry that most pastors shied away from, such as financial exploitation, spiritual manipulation, and the perilous church culture of victim suppression. Her sermons were stirring up controversy among influential people, but they were also garnering her a lot of support from Christians who felt ignored. According to sources, Juanita's increasing prominence was perceived as a danger to the status quo by Bishop Paul Morton, a prominent player in the gospel community and the founder of the Full Gospel Baptist Church Fellowship. She was addressing subjects that many politicians wished to ignore while addressing crowds he couldn't manage. Additionally, was said that he privately asked her to soften her tone rather than joining her in demanding accountability. She didn't follow the advice. From then on, rumors started to spread. Some said Juanita was being excluded from a number of prominent religious functions. Others implied that her name was being subtly taken off of lists of invited speakers at conferences where Bishop Morton had sway. Since everything took place behind closed doors, the public was not aware of this. However, there was a very real undercurrent of anxiety. Furthermore, Juanita didn't remain silent. Indeed, whenever someone attempted to silence her, she seemed to talk louder, preach harder, and expose even more hypocrisy. That disobedience is precisely what would prepare the ground for what we are about to experience. The day she made the decision to officially introduce Bishop Paul Morton, Juanita Bynum did not approach the issue in a tactful manner when she ultimately made the decision to address it. No, the gospel community was left reeling by this extreme gloves-off moment. She knew it would happen during a live-streamed sermon that would later receive millions of social media shares. Juanita changed course halfway through her message. Her voice became more acerbic, her gaze fixed on the camera, and she began to discuss leaders who professed to speak for God but prioritized their own wealth, power, and reputation over the truth. Even though she didn't begin by mentioning Bishop Paul Morton's name, the audience quickly made the connection because she gave enough clues, anecdotes about particular meetings, words he purportedly said to her, and examples that only insiders would know. Then, in what could only be called an explosive moment, she said it directly. you are contributing to the issue. Bishop Paul Morton. The live stream's chat room was a rowdy place. A few viewers fell silent in shock for finally ending what they perceived to be a long-standing silence in the gospel industry. She received praise from others. Her detractors, meanwhile, accused her right away of causing strife within the body of Christ. Everyone agreed that this was a turning point, regardless of their stance. The fallout was swift and severe. According to reports, Bishop Morton's team acted swiftly to steer the conversation. Statements that minimized her claims and presented them as personal disputes rather than systemic problems began to circulate. Juanita simply expressed what thousands of people have been thinking but were too scared to express, an insider told reporters. Videos of her sermon went viral on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok over the course of the following few days. Every word she said was analyzed by church bloggers. Former churchgoers started sharing their own stories, and gospel radio commentators argued about whether she was right or reckless. Her cautions about spiritual abuse and the perils of unbridled church leadership have been widely echoed. However, the quiet discussions taking place between pastors and church officials may have been the most striking indication of the impact. In private, a few said that they had been experiencing similar worries for years, but they were afraid of the criticism Juanita was currently facing. Others redoubled their efforts to maintain the status quo, asserting that unity was more important than public accountability. Regarding Juanita, she made it apparent that she had no plans to change her position or provide an apology. She informed her followers in follow-up communications that it was okay to lose influence, friends, or invitations if telling the truth meant doing so. She reminded them that her mission was never about pleasing people, but about obeying God, and that sometimes obedience entails tearing down the very systems that have been permitted to grow corrupt. The ramifications from this event is still unfolding, and the gospel industry may never entirely return to business as normal again. Whether you perceive her as a bold prophet or a troublemaker, one thing is undeniable. Juanita Bynum dragged the debate into the open, and now everyone is watching to see what happens next.